something revolutionary, and it was at the time. A school to help formerly enslaved men enter the ministry, where education would be the great equalizer from slavery to freedom, an institution of higher learning that would become Morehouse College.
So one of the things that I understood was that there is definitely a contention amongst our community regarding the invitation for Biden, one, to be the commencement speaker, but then on top of that, that he was to receive an honorary degree. Luckily now I can speak kind of freely because some of our information has become public, but the faculty, we were basically divided regarding wanting Biden as a commencement speaker, but we understood that we could voice our discontent, but they were not going to rescind him being the commencement speaker. And so I think at that point, I pretty much already had it in my mind that there was going to have to be some level of protest that I was going to do, and I spoke with other fellow faculty members. But the particular issue was that the students were held to this rule of what they can do and what they could not do.
Gather on this Sunday morning, because if we're in church, perhaps it would be this reflection. It would be a reflection about resurrection and redemption. Remember, Jesus was buried on Friday. And it was Sunday. On Sunday, he rose again. But we don't talk enough about Saturday, when his disciples felt all hope was lost. In our lives, in the lives of the nation, we have those Saturdays to bear witness, the day before glory.
And so, President Thomas, who's the president of Morehouse College, made it clear that a silent protest was very acceptable. However, any type of disruption would actually cancel the commencement overall. So as a faculty member, particularly one who's very connected to their students, I didn't want to be the reason that basically their commencement stopped. But at the same time, students were frustrated that Biden was selected as the commencement speaker, even though they didn't agree that he was receiving an honorary degree from Morehouse. We also had faculty that also was very much disappointed in the way that it was handled by our administration in terms of selecting him and giving him an honorary degree. So it was a moment where I realized that I was going to be at the commencement because I am a student marshal and I wanted to be there to support my students.
But then everything changed. One of my heroes, and he was my hero, a Baptist minister, a Morehouse man, Dr. Martin Luther King. In April of my law school graduation year, he was murdered. My city of Wilmington, and we were, to our great shame, a slave state, and we were segregated. Delaware erupted into flames when he was assassinated, literally. We're the only city in America where the National Guard patrolled every street corner for 9 full months with drawn bayonets, the longest stretch of any American city since the Civil War.
But I wanted to take it upon myself to, one, stand up for my principles, and then also kind of sign in solidarity for my students as well as my other fellow faculty members who felt that we were caught in this moment where it seemed like we as a community selected Biden when we all did not.
And can you talk about D'Angelo Fletcher, the psychology major, the valedictorian's call for an immediate ceasefire, the significance of what he did, standing before really the world, because this was being broadcast by many news outlets around the world. And then also President Biden calling for immediate ceasefire, Dr. Taylor.
When a group of senior members of the Democratic Party came to me, they couldn't find anybody to run, and said, you should run. Nixon won my state by 60% of the vote. We won by 3,100 votes. We won by the thinnest of margins. But with a broad coalition, including students from the best HBCU in America, Delaware State University. You guys are good, but they got me elected. Y'all think I'm kidding. I'm not kidding.
So I was proud of Fletcher. He wasn't a student of mine, and I also understood the mounting pressure for these students basically to make a message, make a statement or to not to make a statement. And the young man, even as he spoke, he said he was a little bit nervous about being the valedictorian, knowing that he would have to give a speech. I mean, if anyone who's ever done public speaking can understand, you know, everyone's there, your family's there, you don't know what your nerves are going to be, but now this heightened moment. And the fact that he made the statement and there was some divide even amongst the students, that he took this moment to basically use his platform to make a statement. I was very proud of him.
My sons are badly injured. We're not sure they're going to make it either. I rushed from Washington to the bedside. I wanted to pray, but I was so angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at the world. I had the same pain 43 years later when that 4-year-old boy who survived was a grown man and a father himself, lying in another hospital bed at Walter Reed Hospital, having contracted stage 4 glioblastoma because he was a year in Iraq as a major, won the Bronze Star, living next to a burn pit. Cancer took his last breath.
Was pandering, and it was the moment, and it's also the conflict of basically this is a commencement speaker for the students, and he's using it as a campaign stage. And so even to the extent that he recited off several things that he did for the Black community, for me, while I was standing there with my fist raised, I was shaking my head because I was just like, this is typically what we see, campaign, like trolling to an extent, pandering to an extent, and these are this young men's future.
The pandemic robbed you of so much. Some of you lost loved ones, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, who aren't able to be here to celebrate with you today. You missed your high school graduation. You started college just as George Floyd was murdered, and there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
One of the things I couldn't help but notice that there are basically the Secret Service there with snipers, right? So there's also the idea that black men who face incredible injustices and policing and harm to their bodies, in their moment of graduation, their moment of celebration, they're also being refined to being repressed and the threat of possibly being harmed if they speak out and protest. So, you know, Biden's statements to me were kind of pretty much very hollow and fell on deaf ears.
To end racism and poverty, to deliver jobs and justice, to restore our leadership in the world. I look down and see the rosary on my wrist that was that of my late son he had on him when he died at Walter Reed, and I was with him. I asked myself, what would he say? I know the answer because he told me in his last days. My son knew the days were numbered. The last conversation was, Dad, I'm not afraid, but I'm worried. I'm worried you're going to give up when I go. You're going to give up. We have an expression in the Biden family. When you want someone to know, give your word, you say, look at me. He was lying to me, he said, look at me, Dad. Look at me. He said, give me your word.
Associate Professor of Africana Studies and a member of Friends of the Congo. Throughout President Biden's address, he was standing in front of the Congolese flag. It was you, Professor Livingston, who was holding up that flag. Can you talk about why and what your demands are?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having us this morning. Actually, it was me and Dr. Cynthia Hewitt who were holding up the flag. And I have to, of course, mention that. But we held up the flag because the police state that Dr. Taylor mentioned in terms of the Secret Service being on campus is local, but it's also global. We held up the flag because the people of the Congo do not get enough media attention in terms of the act of genocide that the United States is supporting through its support of Rwanda, through its support and Rwanda's support of the M23 rebels.
I stood up for George Floyd's family to help create a country. We don't need to have that talk with your son or grandson as they get pulled over. Instead of a trail of broken promises, we're investing more money than ever in black families and black communities. We're reconnecting black neighborhoods cut off by old highways and decades of disinvestment when no one cared about the community. We've delivered checks in pockets to reduce black child poverty, the lowest rate in history. Removing every lead pipe in America so every child can drink clean water without fear of brain damage and can't afford to remove the lead pipes themselves. We're delivering affordable high-speed internet so no child has to sit in a parent's car or do their homework in a parking lot outside of McDonald's.
And it's plain and simple, there are so many Congolese people who could speak to their case, but the U.S. media, most of the major newspapers, most of the corporate media will never feature them. So I'll mention Dr. Kennedy Kihangi Bindu, one of our partners who we brought to Morehouse College from the city of Goma at the University of the Great Lakes at Goma.
I walked the picket line and defended the rights of workers. I'm relieving the burden of student debt. Many of you have already had the benefit of it, so I can chase your dreams and grow the economy. When the Supreme Court told me I couldn't, I found two other ways to do it. And we are able to do it because it grows the economy.
He came to Morehouse and spoke about the situation in the Congo at one of our symposia. We've had a sustained engagement with the Congo that will not show up always in terms of protests, but that type of engagement is transformative with our students. Mm-hmm. We also have a program where we pair our Morehouse students in our first-year experience courses with Congolese students, and they engage in conversation. So I think that's very important. We also recognize the connection of the Congo to the current situation in the Middle East, the fact that President Biden has tried to strike a deal with Dan Gertler, the noted conflict mineral mining magnate, who's also Israeli.
In heeding your generation's call to a community free of gun violence and a planet free of climate crisis, and showing your power to change the world. But also know, some of you ask, what is democracy? We can't stop wars that break out and break our hearts. In a democracy, we debate and dissent about America's role in the world. I want to say this very clearly. I support peaceful, nonviolent protest. Your voices should be heard, and I promise you I hear them. I determined to make my administration look like America. I have more African Americans in high places, including on the court, than any president in American history.
And who has been using those profits in many ways. Those have gone to enrich him, but also vicariously the Israeli state, and therefore the oppression, contributing to the oppression of Palestinian people. So those connections are there, and we raised the flag, we held up the flag, because we couldn't rely on just a chant, because that could be ignored. And even if we gave an interview, maybe not like this one, but with the New York Times, for example, New York Times gave a story on the fact that there have been no protests at HBCUs, or relatively few. And, I was really misquoted in terms of saying that Joe Biden seems like a decent person. But I know, why am I saying that again? I shouldn't be even saying it again. But compared to Donald Trump, I guess anybody could be a decent person.
What's happening in Gaza and Israel is heartbreaking. Hamas's vicious attack on Israel, killing innocent lives and holding people hostage. I was there 9 days after.
But he does not get it. He does not. He may have the Dr. King bust in the Resolute desk or at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, but he is not listening to King. He needs to listen to HBCU faculty who really have held out the only hope of real social change in America in its history, especially in the 20th century, but we could go back even further. So we held the flag for those reasons. Congo deserves justice, reparations from the United States for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, conspiring in that assassination.
5 seconds.
And yes, and the people today deserve a country that is built on peace and justice.
President Biden, thank you for that thought-provoking message. I want to say that from my point of view, you've been listening. You spoke to us about your vision for the future. You spoke to the hard issues confronting our nation and the world at this moment. We are honored to have had you here with us today, and we hope this will not be your last visit to these sacred and celebrated grounds. Please join me again, audience, in thanking President Biden for his generous words. And before you leave, President Biden, we want to present you with a very special honor today. Today, President Biden, it is my pleasure to confer upon you an honorary degree from Morehouse College and count you among the ranks of honorary Morehouse men. And therefore, with the authority granted in me by the Morehouse College Board of Trustees, I confer upon you, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., the Honorary Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities appertaining thereunto. Congratulations, Dr. Joseph Biden.